Welcome back to the Weber State Democrats podcast. I am the president of the organization, Ethan Bishop, and this is our very new special guest, Riley.
Hi, everyone.
And I'm a history major, and she's a history education major, so we got the historians in the house here. I'm going to talk about how Trump is the worst president in American history.
Yep, pretty much.
So the first thing I wanted us to go over is Trump's mass deportation effort. I think this is probably one of the scariest things that he has unveiled and started doing is this mass deportation. So this is from, the source here is pbs.org. The Trump administration has begun a sweeping mass deportation campaign aiming to expel millions of undocumented immigrants. The effort includes ramped-up immigration and customs enforcement, ICE raids, increased detention capacity, and expedited removal procedures. Legal experts warn that the existing infrastructure may struggle to support such an ambitious plan, and civil rights groups are preparing legal challenges. Meanwhile, immigrant communities are experiencing heightened fear, particularly in sanctuary cities where local officials have vowed to resist federal enforcement. So, you have any thoughts about that?
Okay, so I'd start with, the entire process of what he's doing is really extremely similar to the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. These efforts of making camps for these people, murdering them, trying to send them away is very similar to the ideology that Hitler had. And there's been a lot of claims he's made and that are specifically very anti-Semitic. Mm-hmm. So this is really just the 2025 version of the 1900s Holocaust. So
yeah, exactly. And some people will be like, someone even commented on because I posted something on Snapchat, and I was like, yeah, he's demonizing not even just immigrants, but literally
everyone.
Yeah, basically everyone who doesn't support him, Democrats, non-conservative women. And I think going forward, it's important to make that distinction, because when we're saying that women are the victims, but then there's conservative women who are literally part of the reason why he's president. It's like, no, they're really not the ones that are going to be affected, because they're the ones who are fine with being barefoot and pregnant and just bending to the ideology of just random old white men, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, non-conservative women, of course, trans people and immigrants, they are the communities that the Republicans are creating an us versus them narrative against. And that's exactly what fucking Hitler did. And it starts, and it's not really as, I guess, notable, or it doesn't exactly look like murdering 6 million or up to 12 million people like in the Holocaust, mm-hmm. But it didn't start like that in Germany either. They literally just were more and more restrictive laws aimed at a specific marginalized group. What does that sound like? That sounds like what Utah Republicans are doing, Republicans in general. So, yeah, and now he wants to house 30,000 of them in Guantanamo Bay. Mm-hmm. It's like, what the fuck? It's like, didn't Mitt Romney criticize Obama for keeping Guantanamo Bay open?
Yeah.
It's like...
honestly, I think it's just crazy in general, just because of the fact, so I'm Black and I'm a Jew, so kind of got that double whammy there. And I sit here and hear more about what Trump thinks, with the claiming Latinx people are dangerous aliens, and it just, because I know the mass majority of people of color in Utah aren't feeling safe anymore because there's been significant ICE spottings and significant deportation. I'm gonna pull up a story. I went to CVS the other day and someone said I didn't belong here. Wow. I was born here. I didn't come from anywhere else. So I think that the way that he's pushing this agenda is absolutely diabolical. And
yeah. Well, and it's crazy they would say that to you. Since you are Black, it's why do you think that, well, I'm not exactly sure of your ancestry, if you're related to those who were enslaved and that kind of thing. But I mean, probably the majority of Black people you see, it's the reason why they're here is because they're descendants from enslaved people who white people literally chained up and brought over here.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous when they say that. I'm sorry that they did say that to you.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy, and especially with the fact that there's a new little rumor that Trump's bringing around that he wants to deport Native Americans. Where are they going to go? This is their land. What do you mean?
I could totally see him doing that, bro.
It's absolutely wild, and I really wish I could just sit down with him and understand why he thinks this way.
Yeah, and honestly, the weird thing is, on the one hand, he is unhinged and he is just petty, and this is why he'll do different things, like some of which will make his supporters mad. Like, he doesn't have any real ideology, I don't think. He just does whatever he thinks will get him power, and the fact that Project 2025 and all that is right up his alley, or right up the people who can actually help him, that since he doesn't care, he's like, okay, let's just do all of that. And then in his administration, there are actual far-right people who agree with it, whereas Trump, I feel like maybe he does on some level, but he just doesn't give a fuck. All he cares about is his own power, so he doesn't care who gets hurt in the way. It's like, if he can make his, campaign promises, which he's already fucking fumbled on, because he's not even going to try to lower grocery prices and all that, which he said he was going to. It's so ridiculous, but...
Because I know a lot of college students can empathize with me on this. So I'm at the poverty level because obviously at this point, I don't have a job. This is my first semester. And obviously, it's very clear that a lot of people who are starting out in college struggle with money. And the way I can't even buy 2 days of a meal prep without it being over $50 is absolutely wild to me. Like, I'm going off of food stamps. I'm going to, like, the resources on campus, which are actually great. I really suggest them. But it just baffles me because everybody, all the Republicans were saying, oh, yeah, when Biden goes out of office, like, gas prices are going to go down, inflation's going to stop. But we have to understand that the reason inflation has gotten this bad is because of him.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Like, the whole inflation thing, like, it's going to get much worse, and it's actually going to be a lot more accurate to say Trumpflation. Before they were saying Bidenflation, which was really, because that's the funny thing, is that unlike some other countries, like America, and this is partly why Trump lost, is because he wasn't really in favor of it like Biden was, such an aggressive stimulus effort during the pandemic. So he passed the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, which arguably did contribute to inflation in the short term. But then when you see America's recovery compared to these other nations, like America had the best recovery of really any advanced nation, and a little bit more inflation at the time. I mean, I think that was just a fair trade-off, honestly. But now, with inflation going down, as far as the rate of inflation going down and Trump still wanting to do all these tariffs, one thing that annoyed the fuck out of me was how he's putting tariffs on Taiwan, or at least threatening to, for their microchips and everything, because he wants it to be built in America. When it's like, first of all, if you just put in place, or not sanctions, but these tariffs, in the short term, that's literally not going to help anyone. It takes a while for American manufacturing to be built up, so you can't just cut off the supply from other countries and expect it not to wreak havoc on the American economy. And with Taiwan, look what China's trying to do. They want America and Taiwan to be at odds because they want to invade Taiwan just like Russia invaded Ukraine.
Yeah.
And then we're going to have an even bigger situation, whereas Trump said, oh, no, there won't be any wars under me. When there was during his first term, we were literally involved in the Syrian civil war and we did a bunch of other shit. Like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild because a lot of other countries and, providences are standing with, especially with the women's issue and the people of color issue, LGBTQIA plus issue. I've seen a lot on a lot of different social medias where there's a big train of a bunch of people in power from those different countries being like, we stand with you, we will give you a home. And honestly, with the way things turned out, I do plan on leaving the U.S. in the next year. This is not the place I want to be. And I do want to touch on with like the foreign affairs with I think the thing that was most baffling to me this past week was listening to the trial with the Singaporean CEO of TikTok.
Oh, yeah.
So there was a bunch of things where he was talking about, I could probably pull it up later, but some of the judges were like, so have you ever worked in the Chinese Communist Party? And he's like, Senator, I'm Singaporean.
Oh, I actually do remember this.
And there was one thing that absolutely baffled me. One of the judges said, so you're not Chinese? And he says, no, I'm Singaporean. And he says, I'm not leaving until one of you are Chinese.
What the hell? That's crazy.
Like, make that make sense, hello?
It's just racism.
Yeah,
up.
It's absolute racism.
Yeah, it just doesn't really make any sense. And one thing that I do like, though, I was talking to some people at my work earlier, and they were saying, oh, yeah, think about the price of eggs, think about all this stuff, which are literally going up.
Oh, yeah.
And they said that, like, even if it wasn't Trump's fault, and even if we admit that, like, I'm not going to just straight up lie and say Trump is 1,000% the reason for these high prices. But what they did to Biden for 4 years, that's probably the worst thing you could possibly do to a president is say, and with Trump, he's going to be older than Biden is now during his presidency if he doesn't die beforehand. And it's like, we're going to do what they did to Biden to Trump, except I think it'll be even more effective because of how unpopular their actual policies are. Where Trump's going to be all senile and that kind of thing. He already is in many ways, and he's in worse health than Biden for sure. And with the economy and stuff, we'll just blame that completely on them, even if it's like a joke, like because people actually do. That's really the only thing that I think will change this country in 2024, how Republicans, it was actually more of like a red wave year. Yeah. The only way that's going to change is if a bunch of people who voted for Trump and Republicans see that that was not in their best interest. And at the very least, voting for them isn't going to magically fix the economy like they thought it would.
Because it's like, to an extent, I can understand like where some right groups are coming from with Kamala and all this stuff. It's like, yes, she wasn't voted into office. She was there because Biden went down because he knew he wasn't cognitive enough to be a president. And he also got pressured into that, by the way. Yeah. That's a whole thing. And she took that stand, and a lot of people were mad because nobody actually voted her in, but it was by default. So I can definitely understand that frustration specifically, but I also don't think it's warranted when she's sitting here, like, becoming so close with people and forming those bonds only to lose by a few thousand votes.
Well, and that was the thing, though. She wasn't voted in the Democratic primary.
Okay, so we were basically covering Trump, everything about Trump, and like, because
hell of a week.
Oh yeah, I was talking just a little bit. It's like I can sit here and understand, like, empathize with the fact why certain Republicans are so frustrated that Kamala was a candidate, because she wasn't voted into office. But then again, she was voted as vice president, but people are super stuck on the fact that they didn't vote her in to be a candidate.
In the primary, they didn't vote her in. But the fact is that all the delegates did change their vote over to her, so it was still valid.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they never seem to recognize that part. Because all they really ever do is complain about things being unfair when really the system is rigged against Democrats more than anything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And also, just, if I'm being honest, the Democratic politicians, they don't know how to fight.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them just don't fight. They give up.
And I think that's true. That's why I want more of a fighting spirit among the Democrats. I really hope in 2028 we just get someone who will literally tell it how it is, just like
Yeah.
rip Republicans a new one, like every single time they speak. It's actually interesting. Recently, I guess it was a former Trump official. They had actually were talking to Republicans and warning them because they think that AOC could be a really effective candidate in 2028, and they said don't underestimate her, which I think is true because I think the progressives like her, the moderates are fine with her now. They at first they didn't like her, but they like she's in good with. She could probably unite the Democratic Party, and I could see her improving upon. You know how a bunch of Latinos defected to Trump.
Right.
I could see her winning a bunch of them back, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And also, she. I'm still hesitant for a female candidate because I don't know if our country's ready for that. Like, I am, but
Yeah, because we've tried several times.
yes, we've tried multiple
Yeah.
times, and every time we've been smacked in the face with Trump. And I'm a bit nervous going into the next one.
Yeah, and I hate people
going for something that straight. But I do think AOC is a stronger candidate for than Kamala Harris was, simply for the fact that Kamala Harris, one, she was already tied to the Biden smear campaign. Two, she's a moderate, and people don't like moderates today. They really don't, because they are for the status quo, and nobody's happy right now.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
On either side, it doesn't matter. And somebody who is speaking for change and progressive reform, I feel like that speaks to a lot more people than just staying the road.
Well, and it's the populist appeal, I feel like, that the leftists, they need to start getting into that. Part of the issue with Kamala Harris is, and I think she did this intentionally, where literally every word that came out of her mouth, it seemed a little bit scripted, and like she wasn't being genuine. Like if you look back in and this was the other thing, back in the 2020 Democratic primary where she was all super progressive, she just said no. And the thing is, though, is that in many ways, the whole kind of being a political chameleon, that's exactly what Trump did. Because, of course, he used to be a Democrat and all that. But maybe that is true, that the influence of being a woman, the influence of maybe just the way Trump is, people think he's more of like a normal guy or like them, so that he could maybe get away with it in a way that she couldn't
have.
Trump has gotten away with the fact that his character is he's a liar, but he talks so much gibberish, and that it's hard for people who don't really get it to understand or see that he is lying, because he hides it with a bunch of other things immediately following that lie.
Yeah,
or he'll follow it with a bunch of other lies. So it's all obfuscated.
Exactly.
And you just don't.
Yeah, and there's also something I found. I actually saved it on my phone. There was someone interviewed Trump's mother, and she said, yes, he's an idiot with zero common sense and has no social skills, but he is my son. I just hope he never gets into politics. He'd be a disaster.
Yeah.
Mary Ann Trump.
Well,
We're cooked.
rest in peace. I'm sorry.
Well,
but, your wishes did not come to fruition.
if you guys don't mind, I'd like to move on to some more state politics.
Oh,
yes, please. That's what I came here for.
So the source for this is AP News. This is about Utah's proposed ban on public sector collective bargaining or unions. Utah is advancing legislation that would prohibit collective bargaining across all public sectors, including education. The bill, sponsored by Republican State Representative Jordan Tusher, I think is how you say it, aims to prevent unions from negotiating for better wages and working conditions on behalf of workers. Educators view this move as an attempt to weaken teachers' unions and facilitate conservative education agendas. The measure has significant support from powerful Republicans, including House Speaker Mike Schultz, and I believe it did just pass the Utah House.
It
Wow.
did, and I think it passed the Senate earlier yesterday. However, it needs to go through another vote in the Senate. I'm not sure what that's about.
Another writing of it. They're going to do a different version.
Yeah, they said that they were going to change it a bit, but if they do change it, then it's going to have to go back to the House and get revoted on again, which what has been passed through the House the past couple of days, like I swear I've seen like 5 or 6 articles in like the past 2 or 3 days. I will not be shocked if it just passes the House again.
Yeah. And part of it is when you read the full article, it's like teachers unions, they're obviously typically liberal because what the fuck do you think education is? You're getting funding through the state, and oftentimes, well, the more educated you are as far as college degrees, more likely you are to be liberal. So of course they lean liberal. And Republicans, they hate anything, especially Utah Republicans. They hate anything that goes against them and their agenda.
Definitely.
It's as if something goes against their agenda, it's like an itch they need to just scratch, and they're just like, that's why they want to intimidate the courts so that they can put in place their restrictive abortion bans and all that.
Oh, yeah.
That's why they're attacking our judicial system, and that's also why they're attacking ballot initiatives and making it so you would need to grant 60% of the vote, which is exactly what happened in Florida. That's why their abortion protection didn't go through, because it got 57% of the vote and not 60.
Oh my
Wow.
god.
It's so ridiculous.
That's still more than half.
Yeah.
That's
wild.
that's actually a pretty good majority, percentage wise.
So, yeah.
My concern with my mom's a teacher, right? So she's directly affected by it, and I'm affected by it, in turn. And what I find very concerning is taking away money and protection from teachers in education. It is literally shooting the future of this country in the foot. And if things are bad now, things will only get worse if we lower our standards in education. And by getting rid of protections for teachers, making wages for teachers less, or I just saw an article while I was coming into here. I think something just passed where it was like $60 million are being taken out of higher education. There was only one lawmaker who voted against it in Utah. So,
yeah, I mean, when they talk about, and I know a bunch of Republicans probably say that, well, we need to pay our teachers more. And actually, the more ironic thing is the whole firefighters and cops are involved in this.
yeah.
It's like if they want to hire a teacher's wages, it's like they're literally doing the opposite, because they're preventing them from unionizing when that's usually at least part of the goal is to get more wages. But no, and it's like teachers already make nothing. They have to pay for so much stuff out of their own pocket.
Yeah.
And it's just a slap in the face. It's like the idea that any teacher, well, honestly, in America would ever vote for a Republican just baffles me. Or any cop or firefighter. But you know, most cops are very conservative, and they still support politicians who support stuff like this. It's just absolute ridiculous cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
And like it to get rid of unions, I just don't get how anybody that makes a living wage or like does a 9 to 5 anywhere would be against unions in this way, or before this bill that is so aggressive towards public gathering and collective bargaining. What are they thinking?
Yeah. I think something that really baffles me, I'm going to go back to the LGBTQIA community a little bit, but I've seen so many things where different conservatives have been kind of spouting how we're trying to brainwash their kids into becoming gay or trans or whatever else you identify as, and I think that's absolute bullshit. And I'm not going to sit here and like swear like a sailor, because like I don't need to, but I think it's just absolutely wild, because in the end, the entirety of the LGBTQIA plus community just wants to feel safe. And if your kid, if you have a son and he says, I want to wear a dress, that is not because anybody is brainwashing him. And if he's thinking about it at a young age, like 4, which is very common in trans women, they don't have access to that kind of media. I don't think 4-year-olds are on TikTok saying, oh, yeah, I'm on this debate live, and I think I should be a woman. Like,
no, and what if they just want to wear a dress, too? Like,
exactly.
Something
like,
innocent, but then people make more out of things than they are because they had to spin this whole ridiculous message, and they grab onto these simple messages because it's easy to attack.
Yeah.
Well, and sorry to cut you off, but
No,
that's the thing is, they're all like, okay, well, sometimes they'll even say, I'm fine with kids doing whatever. I just don't like the whole like genital mutilation, like because they talk about the trans surgeries.
I definitely have a lot of opinions on that.
But the thing is, though, is they're literally creating the issue because if a little kid wears a dress, they're not going to be fine with that. They're going to be like, no, you're a boy. Why are you wearing a dress? So what does that make the kid want to do? That makes them want the surgery so they can actually pass as a girl.
Oh, yeah.
And so they're literally creating the issue that they're complaining about.
Yeah, and also people think that, like, the mass majority of gender... Yeah, it doesn't happen. It really doesn't unless there's specific parent permission, and in most cases, like, I'm pretty sure the statistic is like 98.2% of situations, parents don't do that because they realize that the front part of the child's brain is still not developed. Like, mine's still not developed, and I'm an adult. Mm-hmm. Like, our brains don't fully form until we're 25 years of age. And, like, I definitely can understand because I'm definitely in the trans umbrella, and I sit here and I'm like, yeah, sometimes I wish I would have just gotten that surgery. But I realized that it wouldn't have benefited me in that moment in my life because being 16 years old, 14 years old, 12 years old, like even anywhere in between that, we are at such an impressionable age. And I hate to say it, but a lot of people who were in that community did kind of push it on me. And I'm not saying, like, I'm an anti-gay person or whatever, but, like, I think the community has changed so much in a positive way, but people really don't like to see it. And they just like to look at, oh, well, drag queens are coming to our schools and trying to brainwash our kids into being trans. Like, literally, drag queens are literally just here to read books to kids.
Yeah.
Right.
And show off their makeup.
And I'd like to add on just like a logical step that I feel like people skip. It's like, you really think that a parent wouldn't do their due diligence before considering allowing this serious life-altering surgery to occur? And not only the parent, what about the doctor? Yeah. Like, I don't think the doctor would just sit by and be like, yeah, sure. Yeah, you say it's all right? Good.
There was a doctor.
There's not going to be any psych eval or anything before they do it? Like, come on.
And that's the thing is the medical guidelines are literally opposed to just cutting off a kid's genitals because they came in. It's like the whole medical guidelines that they're actually legally binded to, where if they go AWOL and they just stray from the whole medical consensus by like the AMA, the APA, and like all that, it's like there are literally medical malpractice laws. So when they're criminalizing stuff like this, they're literally, it's so obviously just targeting a marginalized community because it's already illegal. Just like the whole, like, they want to prevent people sexually assaulting others in the bathrooms and somehow making trans women.
God, that's been my Roman Empire. I can talk for hours about that.
I mean, it's not going to make them any safer. I mean, they can still get sexually assaulted now, like without any. Like, are you kidding me? Like,
I'm just going to put it out there now. If a man wanted to sexually assault you in the woman's bathroom, he would not go through the effort to pretend to be a trans woman. He has the autonomy to just walk in there and do it.
And in fact, that is a fairly common place where that stuff occurs. So it's like.
And this honestly leads into one of the other topics, which is Utah's new guidelines for transgender athletes. And this is from them.us. That's the source for this. Utah has implemented guidelines requiring transgender girls to be undergoing gender-affirming care to participate in high school sports. However, such care is banned statewide, creating a paradox that effectively bars transgender girls from sports participation. The guidelines were established following a 2022 state judge's injunction against an outright ban on transgender athletes. Critics argue that these rules are discriminatory, place transgender youth in an untenable position.
Yeah, so that's something I've been really researching about lately. And I sit here and I listen to these people's arguments about, like, oh, well, this trans woman was born a male, therefore he has more testosterone levels, blah, 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 blah. And all this stuff. And it's like, while that may be true,
It's not.
She's going through active discovery, and most of the time when trans women are in high school, they start going on estrogen. And so those different counts of testosterone to estrogen, they entirely shift. So, and I also hate the thought, I've seen a lot of conservatives say this, that men don't have estrogen and women don't have testosterone, which...
No, it's just different levels. It's just lower levels, or...
Yeah, it's like I still have testosterone in me. That's why, like, I grow body hair, and it's actually wild. And men think like, oh, well, I just have testosterone and progesterone and all this stuff, and I'm like, no, you have estrogen. That is how you have your libido. It's based on estrogen, so it's very silly to me, and I just don't like the paradox that you just mentioned with, like, oh, trans women have to get gender-affirming care, but it's banned, so it's like, just pick one.
Exactly.
So are you going to let trans women go into sports without that care, or are you going to give them that care? Which one?
I mean,
It's like...
no and no. But my question is to the Republican lawmakers that passed this, is that a lot of them speak on, we need to make government smaller. We need to make government's involvements in each other's lives smaller. But what you are doing by doing this is involving the government in these people's lives when you should not be. If you're for small government, you are literally saying, oh, you cannot do this thing because of X, Y, and Z, because we said so, because we made a law to affect you personally and this group of people personally. So if you're really for small government and you're a what's the word? It's
free market, or
no, it's
libertarian.
Libertarian. If you're a libertarian, that's not something you'd want or even pass, because it's like, you do your thing, leave me alone.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what we were talking about earlier, was when we were talking about the mass deportation and how it is actually quite appropriate to compare it to what things that Hitler did, and just creating an us versus them narrative. And with that, it's the migrants, obviously, trans people very, very clearly. And then I would also add women, specifically non-conservative women.
Yeah.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, because something that's interesting to me, I think I mentioned this to you before, but I'm going to go a little deeper into it. Hitler had a hierarchy of how he was going to eradicate people. So on the hierarchy, there were tribalistic African tribes, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Asia, pretty much everywhere on Asia, but outside of the pyramid, there were the Jews, the disabled, and people who were black Germans, so mixed with anything else, or like biracial Germans, right? So he went through the German disabled, and he actually went through people who were veterans of war who lost limbs in the war, because he said, you don't have proof that you were in the war, we can just say you're disabled. So he eradicated them. The next thing he did was he eradicated anybody that wasn't considered the Aryan race. And then he went towards the Jews, right? Because his entire mindset of, well, he had a lot of trauma with, like, the Jewish culture, which doesn't excuse it at all, but he was just like, oh, yeah, I hate Jews because my dad was a Jew and he hit me, blah, 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 blah. And oh, my God, and he went after all these people, started with children, and then went through adults and women. And this is extremely, extremely similar to how the hierarchy of power in America is right now. Like at the top, in the hierarchy pyramid, there's LGBTQ, people of color. What else is there? I think it's those main two.
That Trump is targeting?
Oh, yeah, and liberal, anybody who's liberal.
Yeah,
and
honestly,
women.
anyone who's liberal.
And unfortunately, people who are outside of that pyramid are immigrants. So he's taking out the immigrants first. He's making camps for immigrants, and we don't know if it's an eradication camp, but it seems like for now it's just a holding camp. But it is still just as detrimental. So if we give him this choice and this opportunity, we are going to turn into Germany 2.0.
I mean, he's already doing it, essentially. And what do we do against that or to stop it, really, is what we need to think about, because the steps are already occurring. In fact, he has a 90-day plan on, like, the 90th day of him being president. He is moving, like, all of our military out to the southern border to what is it?
Secure the border.
Secure the border. And that's very similar to the sort of thing that Hitler did 90 days into his control.
Yeah.
And that's how Germany fell. So I don't know, if you can't see the parallels, you're not looking.
Yeah.
Like it's
And even like because even though in some ways we have the best economy in 50 years, like under Biden, like with unemployment being so low and all that.
Sure,
but it's the economic unease. Like even if in macroeconomic scale it looked good with the whole sort of people struggling to get by, that created economic unease. That's how Hitler got into power. And I think that's also how Trump got into power in 2024. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be interesting to see when the economy doesn't get really any better under Trump, or even worse with the tariffs and everything. It's like, I'm curious to see how the American people will respond. And I really just hope, like, you know, the end of the year, it's like municipal and there's going to be special elections. So even in 2025, there's still going to be elections in the fall. Then 2026, that will be crucial. If we could, I don't even know if it'd be possible to take back the Senate. I'd need to look at the map. It could definitely take back the House. We almost definitely will. Because in Trump's first midterm in 2018, the Republicans lost the congressional popular vote by the most they ever had in American history.
Really, I didn't know.
So in 2026, especially if he's being way more aggressive now, we could have a huge blue wave, and I think that might be our best bet. I bet you he could try to make the Congress not like flip over to the new one, just like how he tried to retain power in 2020. And yeah, it's just really scary. And another thing, I don't mean to scare you all more, but this is another thing I wanted to bring up. And the source for this is The Guardian. And this is about law enforcement's involvement with far-right groups in Utah. So in 2023, two leadership meetings of the far-right Oath Keepers in Utah were attended by former law enforcement officers, a serving prosecutor, and a former elected official. The minutes of these meetings detailed training on tactics like hand-to-hand combat and the role of armed responders, in indicating a deep connection between the group and conservative politics, law enforcement, and the legal establishment in Utah and beyond. Despite the conviction and subsequent commutation of Oath Keepers leader Stuart Rhodes, efforts to rebuild the organization continue. And of course, they are very much being emboldened by those pardons Trump gave to all those January 6th insurrectionists. I'm actually very worried that now that the people who battered police officers and committed political violence, that they got pardoned, now they're just going to be like, fuck it, I can just go kill my liberal neighbor, or I can go shoot a liberal politician, and I'm going to get pardoned.
I mean, they might. But this is America, so go buy a gun.
That's very true, actually.
I mean, Oath Keepers. Come on, are they some D&D troop? Like what is this?
It's kind of like the Proud Boys.
Yeah, I mean, they love their names.
It's like there's very little you can do other than arming yourself and trying to, I don't know, just being able to protect yourself. And I mean, I hope that, let's say, because I'm sure it's going to happen, because in his first term, especially around COVID, with them calling the China virus, like, oh, there's an increased hate crimes on on Asians. But in general, all throughout his term,
Yeah.
white supremacists were very much emboldened.
Oh, yeah.
And now with those pardons, like that's just going to give rocket fuel, and I think it already has. So we're going to see. I think we might see some really bad mass shootings. We might see some really bad, kind of like what happened in New Orleans, but with the motive being white supremacy.
Yeah.
And it's just very scary. And then again, this is another reason why we have to win in the midterms. We have to win these municipal elections because these are the people who can actually maybe stand guard and actually prevent all this political violence. Which in many ways Trump was at the receiving end of. Like he almost got his brains blown out, and now he's pardoning people who committed political violence.
Yeah, and I think, I'm not sure if you have this on your little list, but I really want to talk about Elon Musk.
Oh yeah, we could definitely do that.
Oh, what did he do?
Everything. Oh, okay.
Saw
So,
the Onion article.
there was a recent, he was on stage and he was talking, and there's been a lot of controversy of what hand symbol he did.
Oh,
So-
that, yeah.
I didn't even
Sorry, I was thinking, like, what did he do after that? Because
Oh, yeah,
it
no.
seems like he keeps doing stuff, so
Yeah.
I was like,
so-
oh, what
So I'm just going to sit here and say it. People who are trying to defend him and say it was the Roman salute, I have many pictures on my phone of what the difference between a Nazi salute and the Roman salute is. So when you do the Roman salute, you do have your right hand up, but you're pointing to the sky. So you're like this. And your arm is bent.
His was flat. His was a flat palm, and it was...
Again, he also put his hand to his heart and put it all up there.
Yeah.
So if any Republicans are seeing this, if they end up seeing it, if you think it's okay, then you do it. Do it in one of your classes. Do it in the lunch hall. Do it where everybody can see it.
And
if
honestly,
you think it's okay.
the most charitable interpretation of that would be like, even let's say that he was just freaking like stupid and he didn't even think that actually was the Nazi one. It's like he knows exactly what people are going to see that and think. He knows exactly. He knew he was going to get bad press for it. He just did it anyway to embolden Nazism.
And people are trying to give the excuse, oh, well, he's autistic, so he...
That's such a bad excuse.
He's like, they're like, oh, he's autistic, so he doesn't really know what to do with his, like, his bodily gestures.
Oh, no.
I have many friends who are autistic, and
man.
that is not a gesture, respectfully.
Yeah.
Because in another, like 4 years ago, there was another one where he went like this. He says, I put my heart out to you. My heart goes out to you. And then he says the same thing in this most recent time, but he does the Nazi symbol. And then after he's done, he does it twice. He goes, duh, duh, and then turns around, duh, duh. And then he goes, my heart goes out to you.
Well, and the aggression at which he did it, too. Like, you can see on his face, like, the...
Yeah, he
like
was...
I'm going to own the liberals.
Yeah, no, it was like he really...
He knew what he was doing.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing. That kind of aggression was, it was clear. It made it very clear.
Yeah, and then there's also people who are trying to bring up points of like, oh, well, Kamala did this, Biden
She never did
this.
a Nazi salute.
She
Come
did
on.
this. She
Yeah,
was
and
going
she
like
was-
this to the
Yeah,
crowd.
She was sitting there and she was like, we are not going to let this happen again. We are not going to let this happen again.
She wasn't doing...
They're just
Yeah.
grasping at straws at this point.
Yeah,
So they're
it's-
just like putting up different photos of different presidents in the past, like maybe 10, 15 years, and being like, oh, well, they did it too. They did it too. No, they didn't. They really didn't.
So if we can move on, this is the last thing on my list, but if you guys want to bring up anything after, that's totally fine. Utah's proposed legislation on tax increases. State Senator Lincoln Fillmore has introduced SJR2, a resolution that seeks to amend the Utah Constitution to make it more challenging to raise taxes. The proposal would require a 2/3 majority vote in both legislative chambers to approve any tax increase. Fillmore argues that this measure is necessary to protect taxpayers, while opponents contend that it could hinder the state's ability to fund essential services. And that's from Utah News Dispatch. I think this one is a little bit more of a gray area because on
Yeah.
the surface, people may be like, yeah, we don't want them to raise our taxes and that sort of thing. And honestly, I think the problem with Republicans, it's not that they don't want to raise taxes. It's like, I think that honestly, with the budget we have on the state level, if we would just remove certain things, we could then fund more of these progressive ideals. Like, one thing I really don't like is, so like, I'm vegan and everything. I used to be way more into animal rights before I got into politics. I really don't like the animal agricultural subsidies, especially because they say they're for a free market, which that's literally antithetical to it. So, I mean, and it also wastes a lot of water versus if you invested in lab-grown meat and as well as plant-based alternatives and stuff. With the drought problem we have and everything, I just feel like there are things we could take, or like the whole voucher program. Like, they could take out so much bullshit and replace it with something that is actually benefits Utahns.
Or we could tax an organization that is taking advantage of no taxes because of their status.
Yeah.
That pretty much it makes hand over fist a year off the citizens of this state. Yeah. Not to drop names, but if you know, you know.
I don't know.
You don't, it's Mormons.
The LDS
yes.
Church. Yeah.
And honestly, like,
They have their own mall. Like, let.
Yeah.
it's like, I'm totally fine with the Mormon religion and everything, and there's Mormon Democrats and everything. The vice chair of the Utah Democratic Party, he's LDS, and I freaking love that guy. But at the same time, they shouldn't be getting special privilege, and there's very clearly not a separation between church and state here in Utah.
No, there is not. Another thing I'd like to add on that. What was it again? It was the it would make it more difficult for
them to raise taxes so that they need a 2/3 majority vote in both legislative chambers versus a simple majority.
I think it should still just be a simple majority. I don't think that should change because typically taxes are only raised when it is a sort of progressive reform anyways. It's taxes levied on the rich, which are rarely ever done, or they're taken off soon after because we have a Republican majority in this
That's
state.
a good point, actually. Because a lot of the time, like, for example, and this is something that they were trying to slander State Representative Rosemary Lesser, who just lost by about 309 votes. One thing they were trying to slander her on was she wasn't for a tax cut that was actually by percentage. But the reason why she voted against it was because if you take someone who is making way less money and you cut by a certain percentage, it's like, yeah, they'll save them a little bit of money, but put that same percentage on a super rich person. Think about how much money they're going to save. So it benefits the rich. So I think that's a good point. I didn't actually think of it first, that they're probably just doing that to protect the rich people.
Yes.
So
that's that. And that brings me to like another thing I kind of wanted to talk about, which is the economy. And the idea that the economy is doing very well. And I feel like it is on a stockholder's or a capitalist's point of view.
Yeah.
But for people who aren't a part of that club or the majority of people in this country, I don't think the economy is good for us. Like, we are being fed as meat to the grinder, and all of our blood, sweat, and tears goes into getting pennies, if not decimal points of pennies on the dollar for these corporations and companies that we work for. I think it's criminal that people can have so much money while there are people struggling to feed themselves.
And that's the basic Marxist viewpoint. That's why I think that the Democratic Party can literally be everyone from center left all the way to like a socialist, is because it's a simple idea. This isn't even necessarily all that anti-capitalist, but the whole idea of like how it's wage theft, like for example, let's say I used to work at Jamba Juice, and let's say I made like eight smoothies in an hour, and I made all this money for the company, and I'm only going to be getting paid $8, whereas the owner of Jamba, or that kind of thing, they're going to make way more money from the labor I fucking did. So it's like, come on now, like you need to actually own the product of your labor, basically, and that's the basic Marxist viewpoint. And I don't even necessarily think that. Like,
I don't.
You can have a better business model where they make more money that they actually produce.
And I don't even think it's a solely Marxist viewpoint. I think it's just logical.
Yeah.
It's like we are the working class, or if you're listening to this, you're likely the working class, and you aren't making anything compared to what they have. They wouldn't like bend over to pick up your money that was left on the ground. Like if you, all of your money you made in a year left on the ground, you're likely the company or corporation you work for, the CEO or whatever ahead of that wouldn't even bend over to pick that up because it's not worth their time.
And they wouldn't care if something bad happened to you or anything. Like they would, all they care about is themselves and their own greed. And that's the problem we have in this country increasingly, especially with Trump being elected and putting all these billionaires in his administration and people like who are the heads of things that they literally want to destroy. Like, for example, like the EPA or whatever.
That's not a good thing because the EPA doesn't only do environmental protection. They also have systems in place to have hurricane warnings and earthquake alarm systems to alert people to get the hell out of there.
And he wants to do away with FEMA too.
Yeah, it's not good all around. It's scary.
And I mean,
sentiment.
I kind of try to think about it like I try to think about what would be the correct way to tax the rich. Like one thing I've kind of thought of, I don't know how logical it is, but is literally saying no one can be a billionaire, and any money you make above like 999 million or whatever. I'm really bad at math. I don't even know if that's accurate, but like anything before $1 billion, like you can like you can't make anything over it, and if you make anything over it, that goes to funding social programs and different things like that.
Honestly, I think 500 million's enough. Like, I mean,
enough,
who really like? What's the difference at that point?
Yeah.
Really, when you're that many millions, I'll be lucky. I'll be very lucky if at any point in my lifetime I ever have $1 million in my bank account, a single million. Yeah. So that is it. God, it's crazy.
It's like the money that Elon's spending to make his Cybertrucks could be used for so many different things.
Could literally end homelessness, probably actually end starvation,
and
world
put
hunger.
the mass majority of people out of poverty.
Yeah, and they don't want to do that.
Of course.
It's too much work.
I don't think that's it. I just don't think they want to share.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So y'all have anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
There was, do you have something? There was that one article I sent to the group chat. It was the it passed the House last night, I think, or maybe it was 2 nights ago.
Yeah.
That
pulled it up.
The
I got it. Bill
Utah sovereignty.
Oh yeah,
from international groups, so it would prevent them from or keep them from having to follow the World Health Organization's advice or
the WHO. And the United Nations.
And the United Nations as well. It would prevent them from having to follow any guidelines that they previously would have had to. And what also scares me about that is the Paris Accords. So the environmental agreement that Trump ixnayed for the second time, again, because what? And that would keep Utah from having to rejoin it after somebody else becomes president, let's say a Democrat or somebody who just has common sense, and decides to rejoin those Paris Accords. It would keep Utah from having to follow those.
That's so ridiculous because any time, and I noticed this too, they did this with federal lands, how they want to control the federal land so that they can actually, a lot of the people in the Utah legislature were real estate guys, basically. So yeah, there's going to be big mansions in these beautiful habitats if Utah Republicans get their way with it. And they had also passed a bill, which they were trying to slander Rosemary Lesser for not supporting, where they could ignore certain federal directives with Biden in the White House. It's like, and I don't know why this can be hard for some people to grasp, but the Republicans at the state level, they've gerrymandered it so much.
Oh, yeah.
It's so anti-democratic to the point where, honestly, I trust the federal government more than the state government at this point.
feel like that we as Democrats, or honestly the majority of people in Utah, I don't feel like we're being represented by our representatives. Because of how gerrymandered it is. My vote in this state does not count.
Yep.
And unless you lived in this specific district, which they also gerrymandered, because they tried to make it a Republican plus 6 points district, but Rosemary only lost by 308 votes, so she actually did really well.
Wow.
She barely lost. So it's actually quite impressive how she did, because after the 2020 census, they did gerrymander it to include parts of Riverdale and Washington Terrace, which wasn't in it before.
Right.
And but she still ended up winning in 2022. And that's also another interesting thing they're saying, is that now in midterms, they're expecting Democrats to do better, and then presidential elections be a little bit harder, just because the educated people who actually know about midterms and show up, they are actually voting for Democrats, including people who used to vote for Republicans, actually. But yeah, it's just more it's more overreach, and it's more they want it their way. And anyone who says anything opposed to that, even if it's environmental, I could see it coming down to, let's say the federal government enshrines like Roe v. Wade, like they basically pass a bill saying that abortion up until, viability is protected or whatever, just like Roe v. Wade. I could see Republicans being like, no, we're still going to try to restrict abortion. Democracy. Like if they passed a bill, I think it was the For the People Act, where they literally would take the ability to make congressional districts, and I think maybe even state legislative districts, away from the actual politicians on the state level, and it could be created to be non-gerrymandered. Yeah, that they would fucking lose their mind if they tried to do that.
Isn't Planned Parenthood also? Don't they get some of their funding from the federal government?
I don't know.
Or is it all?
Yeah, they get their funding from the government, but they're recently starting to get shut down because.
Well, yeah, because because Trump's agenda is to shut down anything that does anything good. But yeah, I just wasn't sure if they were solely getting their money from donations and things, or if it was from some federal subsidies or whatnot.
Bill that I think Bill Clinton passed that actually made it so federal funds can't fund abortion. But I don't think that necessarily precludes Planned Parenthood, because I do believe they actually do get some funding.
Because they don't only do abortions, but they get a lot of flack for that.
I've gone to Planned Parenthood after, when I was a teenager, I got cheated on. I got back with her, and then I was like, I need to get tested. That was dumb.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, got anything else? Nope. You guys think we're good?
I'm good.
Well, yeah. And what was your name again?
Brendan.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Nice to have you on the podcast.
Nice to meet
you as well, Riley.
Shake your hand.
Yeah. So, yeah, have a nice day or night, everyone.
Good night.